For our Project Stay students, as you notice, this is a little bit unusual. We have such a large group, but we do have a UE 100 class that is joining us today. So, and then for the UE 100 class, I appreciate you guys coming and being here today. We do, Project Stay does workshops like this throughout the semester every year. So you guys are going to sit in with us today as we talk about presentations and kind of give you an idea of the types of things that we do with our students. So you guys should all have a printout of the PowerPoint that I made for you. You can take notes on it, keep it, do whatever you want with it. But we'll go ahead and jump in and get started today. We decided, and we were talking about what workshops we wanted to present this semester, that this was something we've never really addressed with our students, and thought that it might be beneficial for students to hear about. How many of you guys, and I know we have a lot of students in their first semester here with the UE class, but how many of you guys have already had to, or are going to have to present for something for one of your classes? Okay, are you guys presenting something in your UE class? Okay, all right, well this is good preparation then. And even if you haven't had that experience yet, these are good tips, because more than likely at some point during your years in college, you're going to have to present some material, and more than likely when you get out into the workforce, in some manner of speaking, you'll be presenting to groups in some manner. And just a little bit of my personal experience. I worked at Southern for 8 years doing Project Stay, and I worked in another similar program before that, and I absolutely was terrified to stand in front of a group of people and present like I'm doing today when I started 8 years ago. So this is something that takes practice. The more you do it, the more you get used to it, the more you develop your skills. So we're going to talk today about some things that you can do to present well. But one thing I can tell you is the more that you do that, the more that you practice these skills, the more it becomes routine and doesn't feel quite so scary. You know, today it doesn't feel like a big deal to me to stand here and talk to a room full of people. So if you're one of those who maybe that absolutely terrifies you, because not a lot of people love public speaking, I would just encourage you that the more you do it, the more you practice it, the easier it gets. So we're going to talk about 3 strategies today for becoming an expert presenter. And we'll talk about the details of each one of them as we go through. But the first one is, and I put this one first because I really believe this is the absolute most important thing when it comes to presenting, and that is to be prepared. So if I were to ask any of you in the room to come up, trade places with me, and talk for the next 30 or 40 minutes on a topic, would you be able to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Any topic.
Even a topic you're interested in. Yeah? Okay, so some of you would be able to do that. Some of you, that might be terrifying for, even if it's a topic that you know well. Like I said, I've been presenting to groups for 8 years, but I still had to put preparation into this presentation today. So unless you're someone who is just uniquely gifted at public speaking, and there are definitely people out there like that, then doing a presentation and doing it well takes preparation. So, a couple of things that we'll talk about specifically. The first is to do your research. And this is important, even if you are talking on a subject that's something that you know well. More than likely, on any topic, you don't know everything that's out there to know. So doing your research is really kind of that important piece. You want to know that when you stand up in front of a group of people to talk about a subject, that you're knowledgeable about it, that you can speak to the subject, that you've got information behind you to back up the things that you're saying. And like I said, this takes time, this takes research. Before I started putting together the PowerPoint for this, I went out and I looked at some different resources. I found some different websites that talked about putting together presentations. So, even though this is something that I do frequently, I know there's still more out there. There's still other people that have good information too. So I would say for any of you getting ready to do a presentation, make sure this is your first step. Go out there and get some information that you think you need to include in your presentation. Okay, the second thing that you can do as far as being prepared is to ask yourself a couple of questions. In general, you want to know, what does my audience need to know? So think about the group that you're going to be presenting to. You guys obviously are going to be presenting to your classmates later in this semester. So whatever topic you're presenting about, what information is going to be useful to them? And there's some more specific questions that you can ask yourself when it comes to this as well. First of all, you can ask, okay, who is my audience? Is it peers? Is it instructors? Is it community members? Asking yourself that question can give you an idea of what type of information might be important to them. Asking yourself what they already know about the topic. So are you presenting to a group of people that already know a lot about a topic and you're talking about something more specific? Or are you talking to a group who is going to be brand new at this subject? You can tailor your information based on those questions. Also, how can this presentation be helpful to them? So, when I was getting ready today, I tried to think about, as students, what would be helpful to you to know for presenting a workshop or a presentation in one of your classes. What will their expectations be? So, an important one here when we're talking about school is, obviously, what are the expectations of your instructor? And hopefully you guys are getting, anytime you're doing information, usually an instructor is going to give you some pretty clear guidelines as far as what they expect, but taking that into consideration is important as well. And then asking yourself how your audience can apply to information. So are you giving information that they can easily take away and use for whatever you're presenting on? So asking yourself some of those types of questions is going to give you an idea of what does your audience need or want to know. The next thing is questions. So a lot of times when you're doing a presentation, there's going to be time at the end for questions and answers built in, or throughout the presentation you may want your audience to be engaged with you. So thinking beforehand about questions that your audience might ask about your topic is another good way to help yourself be prepared, because a lot of times you're going to have that happen when you're presenting to a group of people. Somebody may have a question about the information you're presenting or want further explanation. So thinking about ahead of time, okay, what questions might somebody ask is a good way to prepare yourself, because it can be scary to be standing in front of a group of people and somebody asks you a question and you don't know. So as I was putting this together, I thought somebody might ask me the question, what if somebody asks me a question I don't know? So if that happens to you, there are some ways to handle that, because the reality is that might happen to you. That's happened to me before. So some ideas for if you get that question that you don't know the answer to. The first thing I would tell you is to be honest. It's better to be honest and say, you know what, that's a good question and I don't know the answer, rather than to try and make up an answer or try to ignore the question in some way. But I would recommend also, if you do that, a couple of other things. You may get a question from somebody that you don't know the answer to, but somebody in your audience might know. So if somebody in the audience knows the answer to your question, feel free to ask people to share. Also, like I said, admitting up front you don't know the answer to the question is okay, but if that's the case, offer to find information and follow up with the person who wanted to know the question. So that doesn't have to be a really awkward moment. Just anticipating it though and thinking about some of the questions can help alleviate that, but then just being honest and making that admission if you're not sure is an okay thing to do too. Okay. Another thing that you can ask yourself. Okay. So another recommendation that I have is don't just talk. Because you don't want to be like this guy on the screen where he's just talking, and everybody is kind of falling asleep. So a good thing that you can do is to consider some activities or some way that you can engage your audience. So what I want you guys to do, just kind of as an example of this, is to think for a minute about a presentation that you've been to, one that was really good, and then think about one that was maybe not so good, and kind of what those looked like. So take a minute, and then if somebody has an example they'd like to share of like a good and bad presentation, what made it good and bad, and you don't have to tell who it was or where it was at. But think about that for a minute, and think about what made it good or what made it bad. Anybody have something they can think of?
I got one.
Okay.
A couple years ago, I went to a presentation over sports. The audience was engaged. Everybody seemed happy to be there, wanted to learn. And then, not to name any names, my art appreciation class, there's been a few presentations that are they're so monotone. They're just spitting, constantly reading down. They're not looking at anybody.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Those are good examples. And it makes a difference. Sometimes you're going to be in a class or a workshop that maybe the topic isn't of huge interest to you, so that can make a difference. But when you're in a presentation where people are engaged, when people have the opportunity to ask questions or share, that could really go a long way as far as making it a good presentation. So you can think about some ways that you can engage your audience, like asking them to share experience. You can also incorporate small hands-on activities that are easy to do. Like an example that I can give you is last semester I did a presentation, a workshop for our students on healthy relationships. And the first thing that we did before we actually got into the presentation was I divided the group into 2 smaller groups. They each got like a poster board, and they had characteristics of relationships on their pieces of paper. And they were either healthy characteristics or unhealthy characteristics. And as a group, they had to kind of put them on their board in the healthy or unhealthy side. So it was an easy activity. It wasn't, it was pretty obvious where things needed to be, but it got everybody thinking about the topic. And it got them interacting with each other, gave them a little activity to do. So they got to talk to each other, they got to do the little activity, and then we moved into talking about the things that they put on their board. So thinking about a short little activity like that you can do, it engages your audience, takes the pressure off you for a few minutes, and it can get them thinking about the things that you want to talk about. Encouraging people to ask questions as you go. So I don't think I've said that, but I do want you guys to be able to do that if you have questions as we go. But letting the audience know that it's okay to interact with you is another way that you can avoid a situation like you see up here. You can ask your audience questions, ask them to share like we just did. Short video clips are okay too. It's really easy to embed a YouTube video in a presentation, and those can be good ways to do something to where you're not just up there talking the whole time, but you're seeing information from another source as well. And you can also use real life scenarios. You can give your class or your group something to think about and talk about as a group and come back with answers together. So there's a lot of things that you can do besides just talking to get your audience engaged in your presentation as well. Okay. Share. And so what I mean by this is, obviously when you're doing a presentation, you're going to do research, you're going to have facts and information to share with your group. But sometimes it can be good to share your own personal experience as well. I try and do that some when I do presentations, like, telling you guys about my experience presenting in front of groups. But think about your topic and think about the kind of experience, if you have any, within that topic. So what are you guys presenting on in your UE class later in the semester?
Country that was assigned to us.
Country you're assigned to? And so are you presenting about specific things within that topic?
Yeah, like the culture, tradition, how is it related to U.S. government.
Okay.
Just basic stuff like that.
Okay. So, you guys be able to find somewhere within your specific topic, something that you can share or relate some experience that you've had. That may not always be completely possible, but it's always a good thing to think about. What can I share with my audience? Anything that you can do to make a connection with the people in the audience. So, when you share your personal experience, it makes you a little bit more human to your audience. They kind of see the side of your experience and things, and that can help them connect to your topic as well. So think about what you might be able to share personally that you've experienced or that you've seen, or even maybe what you've learned that you didn't know before in presenting on your topic. Those can be good things to include as well. Okay, make notes. So, we've already talked about how important it is to do your research. And as you guys are doing your research, obviously you're going to come up with the things that you want to talk about as you're doing your presentation. And it's really important when you're getting ready to give a presentation that you've got some sort of notes. So you can do that in any way that works for you. You can do note cards that you hold. You can do like notes like this is what I do. I print out the page that I'm going to be on. I type my notes. These are the things I decided that I wanted to specifically talk about, and then I've got them to reference. It's really hard to memorize everything you want to talk about a topic, and then if you add being nervous about talking in front of a group on top of that, that can make it even more difficult. So you want to make some notes as you're doing your presentation so that when you're standing up there in front of the group, you've got something you can look at. I don't remember every single thing that I'm going to talk about today, but I have notes so that I have just a short little note that jogs my memory so I remember the things that I want to talk about when I get up here. The thing you want to be careful about is to keep them short so you can easily glance at them and see. It's kind of a trigger. Okay, I wanted to talk about that when I was on this slide. So making those notes so you've got something real handy that you can look at. However, the thing I would caution you about is that what you should not do is make notes and then just stand there like this and read them to your audience in a monotone voice. You want to know the information that's on your notes. You don't want to necessarily write out paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of what you want to say. Jot down some ideas that are going to trigger your memory, but know your information so that when you get up here, you know what you want to talk about and you're just using your notes as a cue. Okay, I wanted to talk about this, this, and this. Sometimes doing like a bulleted list is a good idea. All right. Okay, so our second tip is using visual aids. And this can be several different things. Obviously, I'm using PowerPoint today. That's what I've used forever, and it's what I'm used to. But there are lots of programs out there you guys can use. There's obviously PowerPoint. There's Prezi. There's Keynote, Google Slides. There's a lot of them out there, and it's really just a matter of finding the one that works best for you or the one that you prefer or like best. I've used Prezi a little bit. I'm not as familiar with it as PowerPoint, so that tends to be what I stick to. But you want to do something to go along with what you're speaking about. So typically I'll do a PowerPoint and make a copy of that to hand out, but you need to put some thought into what you do for your visual aids. So really the tips that we're going to talk about will work no matter what, whether you're using PowerPoint or Prezi or any other program that's out there. Okay, so first, I would like to say that the best thing that you can do, one of the best things you can do when it comes to your PowerPoint, your handouts, whatever you use, is to keep it simple. If you put slides up that are long and complicated, they can be more distracting than they can be helpful. So when you're thinking about what to put on a slide, think about, how can I portray what I want to say, but do it in a way that's not burdensome to the audience. And also something to remember is, if you put up a slide with paragraphs of information, then it takes your audience time to read that, which means that they're not paying attention to you. So you really can't read and listen to somebody at the same time. If you do, your full attention is going to be on one and not the other. So just know if you put up lots and lots of information on a slide, then that means that time your audience is reading your slide and not engaged with what you're saying. So you want to try and make sure that your audience can look at your slide quickly and know what you're going to talk about related to that slide. Okay, another important thing to remember, and this kind of goes into what I was talking about making notes. Slides are great, presentations are great. Having something visual is a good addition to what you're going to talk about, but remember that what you have up here on the screen is supplemental to what you're going to talk about. You're the one who's done all the research on the topic. You're the one who's become the expert in whatever you're presenting on. So you want the focus to be more on you as opposed to being on the slides. You are more important than the slides. So just keep that in mind. They're not here to do the work for you. They're here to supplement what you're going to say to your audience. You're the one with the knowledge, so don't let the slides kind of steal that attention for you. They add a nice visual element. They engage your eyes as well as your ears when you're in a presentation. But you don't want that to be the major point of interest. Okay, so I have a couple things here, a couple suggestions, and actually I want to show two things to you guys before we talk about this. So, and I'm sorry this is kind of small, but when I pulled up these two slides, these are from a sample presentation I used. What slide is your eye drawn to more easily? This. Okay. If you were wanting to get the information, which one would be better?
Left side, your right.
This. My left, your right.
Your left or
Yeah.
right?
Okay. So you guys, if you were in a presentation, which one would you prefer looking at? This one or this one? Which is least overwhelming if you're trying to listen at the same time? Okay. So the thing is, like I mentioned before, it's very difficult to read a slide full of information and listen to what a presenter is saying at the same time. So, that's not to say some of you, I think, said that you prefer this one. Well, that may be just what you're used to and what you prefer to see. Something like this is going to be a little bit easier if you're wanting the audience to keep their attention on you. Doesn't mean that you can't do a slide like this, but you just want to be cautious of not putting too much information on the screen. Like I said, that's why we talk about how the slides are kind of the supplemental piece, and that you're the one that should be doing the talking. Okay. So, a couple of tips as far as your actual slides. Bulleted lists are okay to use in a slide, so feel free to do that. But a couple of things to keep in mind is you want to keep your statement short, and you want to limit the number of bullets that you're using, 3 to 4 to a slide. So so you don't have so much information that it's overwhelming. You want to keep your statement short, like this. This is a short statement. It's a short statement, so you don't want real long paragraphs full of information that your audience is trying to read while they're listening to you. And you can also consider just using a picture. Like if you remember several slides back, we had the picture of the guy talking to the board audience. Sometimes a picture can be a more powerful visual that portrays your message as opposed to words. So if you can somehow use a picture that's going to portray what you're trying to say, you can do that as well. Okay, make it clear. What you want to do is ask yourself, are my slides easy to follow? Is it easy for my audience to look at a slide and be able to quickly tell what we're talking about? So you guys know that we're in here talking about how to make presentations. So, you want to ask yourself, okay, well, considering the conversation that we're going to be in, is my audience easily going to be able to know what I'm talking about? So some other things you can do is to use headings. Like you'll see, I've kind of kept whatever tip we're talking about, I've kept this over to the side as kind of a visual cue for you as well. Again, this is where keeping your statement short and simple comes in. It makes it clear for your audience that this is what we're talking about. This is what we're covering at this point in the presentation. Okay, let's talk a little bit about fonts. I'm guessing that, and this is kind of small a little bit maybe for some of you guys in the back, but you really need to think about, put some thought into what font you're using, because there are some really cool fonts out there, and there's tons of them to choose from, but you need to put some careful consideration into which ones you're actually going to use in a presentation. They're not all good for a presentation. So as you can see, some of the ones that are on here that are really nice looking fonts aren't necessarily going to be the greatest for a presentation when your audience is trying to be able to quickly and easily read what you have on your slides. So I would recommend that if you're taking the time to maybe play around with some different fonts. I used a couple different ones before I picked the one I used for this presentation. But you want to think about if your audience is going to be able to quickly and easily read it. So something like this where the words are real thick and bold, or something like this where it's got kind of the fancier cursive type writing, is harder to read than something plain and simple, kind of like what's in the middle here. And there's still lots to choose from, so give this some consideration. And ask yourself if your audience is easily going to be able to read your fonts. You want to avoid some of the really fancy ones when you're talking about a presentation like this. You also need to think about what background you're going to use. So when you guys look at this screen, which side is easier to read?
Yellow.
Yeah, the background, and obviously I picked one that was very distracting on purpose, but it's still something you need to think about, because even if you're using a background that is much more subtle than this, anything in the background is still going to take the reader's attention away from your text. So you just want to be careful that you're using something that's clear, that's easier on the eyes, and that's simple for your audience to read. Okay, so our third tip is all about presenting with confidence. Is there anybody here that would say they absolutely just love public speaking? They love talking in front of a group. Okay, we've got a couple. So, and there are some people that this is something that comes easily to them. It's something that they enjoy. But for a lot of people, it's a big fear. I don't know if you guys have ever heard. I've heard this more than one time in my life, that when they poll adults in this country, a lot of them list fear of public speaking before they list fear of death, which I think is a little extreme, but a lot of people do list public speaking as something that's very difficult for them. So being able to get up and present in front of a group with confidence can be a difficult thing, but there are some steps you can take. The things that we've talked about already are all going to help you, but there are also some specific things you can do to make sure when you get up there and you're standing in front of that group that you feel confident in what you're doing. And the first, this goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the presentation, is knowing your information. if you're standing up here and you know that you've spent the time to research your topic, you've learned as much as you can on the topic, you've studied it, you've practiced your presentation, you've gone over your notes, then you should be able to feel fairly confident that you know the information that you're going to talk about, that if somebody asks you a question, you're more than likely going to be able to answer it. So make sure, when you guys go to present on your cultural, let's see what we are, Turkey, right? When you guys go to do your Turkey presentations, that you've read that information, that you know it, that you're confident that if somebody asks you a question about the topic you're presenting about, that you can answer that question. That's going to go a long way towards helping your confidence. Okay, the next tip is speaking to your audience where they are. And what I mean about this is kind of asking yourself some of the questions that we talked about earlier. What does your audience already know about the topic? If you are presenting on a topic to a group of people that's already an expert in that topic, what do you need to talk about? You need to talk about some pretty advanced things within that area. But if you're talking to somebody who's just a very beginning learner in this area, then you need to make sure and keep it basic. So this kind of goes back to asking yourself, who's my audience and what is going to be their knowledge level about this area? So you guys are all learning about Turkey this semester, so you guys probably, maybe some of you know a little bit about Turkey. I wouldn't know a whole lot about Turkey, so if I was going to do a presentation, I would probably stick to some of the basics within my topic, assuming that probably the people in UA 100 classes aren't already experts on that topic. Whereas if I was going to present to Turkey to some geography instructors, then I would need to take that into consideration and think about what maybe they already know about the topic and what I can present that will be useful to them. Okay, talk to your audience. And what I mean by this is, make eye contact with your audience. Move around some if you're a person that can do that. What you want to avoid when you're giving a presentation is looking at the floor or looking at the walls, not making eye contact with your audience. Or you also want to avoid looking at the screen the whole time, which can be things that happen kind of easily for students, especially when they're nervous. But the more that you can move around and talk to your audience, the more engaged they're going to be with you. So you just want to kind of keep that in mind. They're the ones that are here to hear you. They're the ones that can talk back if you want people to talk back. So staying engaged with them and not just keeping your notes in front of you, but just using them as a reference and making eye contact is a good way to keep them engaged and feel more confident about what you're doing as well. Okay, I found this quote and I liked it. I thought it was very appropriate. So you're talking about being prepared. Tomorrow's victory is today's practice. So I can't say this enough. You need to practice your presentation before you give it. And this can feel kind of silly. Yesterday afternoon, I had my slides ready to go. I had my notes made. So I sat in my office and I timed myself and I talked through each of these slides, just sitting by myself in the office because I wanted to make sure that I felt confident that I knew what I was going to talk about on each slide, that I was going to be within the right time frame, and that I was comfortable with what I was doing. So you absolutely need to practice. And I would say, if this is something you're new at and you're really nervous, ask some friends to sit in and practice in front of them. That gives you, a chance to get your presentation out, to practice it, run through it, do it in front of an audience that can give you feedback, and that will help prepare you. That's going to help you feel more confident when you get up to do that you've already done this once, you've gone through it, you know what you're going to talk about, you know you're going to be in the right time frame. Practice, practice, practice. Okay, and then finally, be enthusiastic. Again, like you were talking about your art presentation where it just felt kind of dry and monotone and not great. If you as a presenter aren't interested in your topic or aren't engaged with your audience or aren't excited about what you get to present, then your audience is going to feel that. Now, you guys may, I'm sure, at some time in your lives, you're going to present on a topic that is not wildly exciting to you. Maybe Turkey isn't your favorite topic to talk about. So you have to find a way to be enthusiastic about it. And sometimes it's just the things that we've talked about: staying engaged with your audience, making eye contact, encouraging them to ask questions. You want to do everything that you can do to make sure that your audience isn't completely bored or doesn't think that you dislike the topic. And that's an important thing in a presenter as well. Okay, just kind of to wrap it up, our three subjects that we talked about, preparation, proper use of visual aids, and practicing your information. Those things are all going to go a long way in helping you guys to be successful and to get that practice. And like I said, the more you do this, the more comfortable it will become for you. And those of you who already are comfortable speaking in front of a group, that's awesome because not a lot of people are. And you guys can still, work to hone your skills. So kudos to you guys that are comfortable doing this. To those of you who aren't, just know, I'm being honest with you when I told you that something like this used to terrify me. The more you can do it, even as scary as it is, the better it's going to be for you in the future. So practice every chance that you can get. I know that most people aren't usually jumping up and down to offer to present to a group of people, but if you get that opportunity, do it. A lot of times when you guys go out and you're done here with your degree, you're going to get a job in some area and you're going to be expected to talk in front of groups of people. And that's been my experience at several of my jobs. So they're good skills to have. They're skills that employers like to see. And they're definitely things that you guys will use in the future. Do you guys have any questions or anything you want to share your experience with presenting, things that have helped you or for you?
Did you do any tricks to get over your fear?
I would say, no, I don't know that there were any specific tricks, but really just doing it over and over again kind of is what's gotten me over that. And just going out there and doing it. It's scary at first, but it's just a matter of going out there and doing it. And I think, for me, and we talked about this, the being prepared. Like when I get up in front of a group and I know that I've done my homework and I've researched my topic, that goes a long way to making me feel more comfortable.
No, I've seen people move too much. Like they're walking all the way across the room to help them so much, I guess, not to be as nervous. There should be a limit to that, correct?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good, it can be distracting if you're moving too much. Like if I was circling the room the entire time that I was talking, that could be distracting. So I think that's a good point. I think it's okay to move around some, but too much can be too much as well. I've had presenters at times that I was in a presentation actually in this room a couple months ago where the presenter presented from the back of the room. Like we had information up here, but he presented from the back of the room, and it just kind of felt a little strange to me. So yeah, that's a good thing to think about. It can be really easy to move a lot or talk a lot with your hands when you're nervous. So holding on to notes can help that. But yeah, I think that's a good point.
With that, we were always taught in high school in my speech class, move in a box, like in a box formation, you take 1 or 2 steps and then move in a box, and then during debate it was contentions. Every contention you took a small step.
Okay, so that's a good point, and that would be something easy to do in a room like this where you've got kind of a carpet like this, so you can kind of think about what space do I want to move around in. Like we videotape our workshops, so like before I was looking to make sure I'm going to be in the space, so kind of thinking about the box or 1 or 2 steps is a good idea. Thank you. What else? Do you guys have other things that have helped you or that you find useful when you're getting ready to present? Those of you that like public speaking, anything that you guys would share?
It's probably easier if you get to know your audience a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. So get to know your audience because you're going to present to them.
I don't have a problem getting up and talking in front of class, obviously, because I'm probably the most talkative one in here so far. But I just don't love it. It's not something I prefer to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for a lot of people. For some people, it's not hard necessarily to do, but it's not their favorite thing to do. And you kind of have the whole extreme from your people who absolutely love being up in front of a group to absolutely despise it. Everybody's different, but still important to, when you've got that presentation coming up, making sure that you're taking steps. What else? Do you guys have other questions or things you'd like to share?
What about you, Cole?
Nah, man.
You good?
We thought I was trying to, right?
Calm down like that. It's like that side of the room hasn't said said anything.
I know.
Hey, you've been covering it all for me, bro. You've been on point, man.
So what should you do when you're giving a presentation, your audience won't talk back?
You sit long enough, like, just don't say
Ask
anything,
them.
someone's gonna get awkward.
Keep
Yeah,
asking.
somebody's gonna be uncomfortable with silence, and we'll share. Yeah, but sometimes that can be a challenge too. And to be honest with you, I didn't think about that before now. So there can always be things that pop up that you don't think about your presentation, but that can be a challenge too. And sometimes that's where having some sort of activity planned can help with that. So at least you've got something specific that they can do to kind of get involved.
Another idea that somebody gave me, if you don't have response, to rephrase your question.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because it's always possible that maybe you've asked your question in a way that your audience didn't quite understand, or they're not sure what information you want, so that can be a good tactic too. Thank you. Anything else?
So yeah, one other thing, like, with presenting is be aware of how you're talking, because a lot of times people talk too fast when they get nervous, and I know I've done it in the past, and I like the sound of my own voice, I talk a lot, but just be aware of how fast you're talking or how loud you're talking. Because, you know, like you said, if you're looking down, you're going to be really quiet and no one's going to know what you're saying. So but don't be like awkward about it, you know, yelling or something.
Yeah, there's a good balance. Those are good tips. Thank you. Good ideas. Anything else? You guys have shared some good information. I appreciate that. Okay. Well, I have evaluation forms for those of you in Project C, if you wouldn't mind filling them out real quickly. And then I think, Robin, the plan was for me to take a few minutes and talk about Project Savior. Right?
That'd be great.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me pass these out to our Project Savior. You guys can fill those out and then take off when you're done. And then
Should I take it?